Hey y'all, Wild Philosophy here. So I know it's been a little over a month, 1 month and 6 days specifically, since our last book review, but today I would like to talk about H. Rider Haggard's novel, People of the Mist. It's one of his more obscure works. Even if you've heard of him, I doubt you've heard of that one. Nonetheless, it was the first one I read because it was free, bluntly. So the interesting thing about this novel um, is that it is one of those novels in which the author has all of the protagonists except the main character look amazing. So the main character, sorry, whose name is Lucas, does literally nothing throughout the course of the book. He has one heroic moment in the first 150 pages, and in the next 350 he is basically a useless lump of dead wood whose only function is to get the rest of the characters into mortal peril. Contrast this with even his servant. His servant is a 4-foot tall dwarf, and I bring up the height because there is one especially memorable scene where the 4-foot tall dwarf leaps from the top of a 70-foot tall tower, armed only with a knife, in order to do battle with a 55-foot long alligator. So that's the kind of contrast we are looking at here between the main character who does so little I can't even talk about what he doesn't do, and his sidekick, Otter, who wrestles an alligator, just off the top of my head, that's 13 or 14 times his size, to death. Spoiler, he wins, yeah. Spoilers as usual, all of these reviews. But what I really want to talk about in this book, because it was an amazing book, in spite of the uselessness of the main character, is how well this book demonstrates honor and sacrifice, both the two virtues in the rest of its male characters. So there are 3 male protagonists aside from the main character, Lucas. There is the priest, Father Francesco, the African king, King Olfan, and Otter, the dwarf servant. And all 3 are paradigms of, respectively, what we view as the 3 most attractive virtues in a man, or in manliness, to manliness, and in a man: honor, sacrifice, and, in Otter's case, fidelity or loyalty. I'm going to use each one because teaching by, or learning by example, I'm not a teacher, I'm not intelligent enough, but learning by example is the best way to learn, at least in my humble experience. So Otter, as mentioned, is fiercely loyal to his companion. He follows him throughout the entire novel, even though there's little to no prospect of reward for him doing so and almost certain death. He wrestles an alligator to save his life, and at the end of the novel, again spoiler, he quits his country of birth, Africa, Otter is Zulu, to travel back with Lucas and Lucas's wife. He meets her during the journey, and we'll get more into her in a bit. But he travels back with him to England, a place he's never been, and where he spends the rest of his life all out of loyalty to his leader, which is especially impressive given that Lucas exhibits no traits that would make him worthy of this affection. He's not a bad master. He certainly reciprocates Otter's love, but he doesn't do an awful lot for him. And this brings us to sacrifice. Father Francesco falls in love with the girl Lucas marries, Juana. Father Francesco, incidentally, is a Catholic priest. Catholic priests must be celibate, but Haggard, normally the literary standard in such instances is the priest betrays his vows and tries to, like, take the woman by force, and it all goes downhill. Haggard flips this around, where the priest's determination to do his duty, and to keep his oath, because you do take an oath of celibacy when you join the Catholic clericdom, and his determination to keep this oath, he keeps it throughout the novel. He never does even shows his affection towards her, and eventually he sacrifices his life for her. He also falls from the top of the tower, and she was supposed to fall instead. He arranges for the two of them to be replaced so that he can die instead of her, due to both his love for her and in order to finally conquer his sin, as he puts it. Which is very, admirable, because he gets, again, she doesn't even know until after he's dead that he admired her in the slightest. So he literally loses his life for this woman, eventually, and which again epitomizes what we might call the virtue of sacrifice, which is giving up what's important, things that are important to us, for more important goals, or for other people, such as sacrificing your independence when you marry, sacrificing money to help the poor. I can go on and on. It's not really a virtue in and of itself, but it's more like a precondition to virtue. You must be willing to sacrifice to live a good life. And this brings us to, specifically, Francesco's refusal to violate his vows brings us to honor. Honor has several definitions. I'm not going to get into all of them here, but one of the values that remains consistent across every definition of honor is the value of keeping our promises. I have sworn an oath of celibacy, and so I will, theoretically, and so I will die without having sex, is one good example in this novel. Similarly, people who swear an oath till death do us part, and then they keep that oath till they die. Same with people who, contracts are another oath. If I sign a contract with Tim Hortons not to badmouth the company in public, and then I go on social media and I'm like, Tim Hortons treats their employees like crap, I have broken my oath to Tim Hortons by insulting the company. And we could talk about Francesco. All three characters, male characters, are excellent examples of keeping one's oaths. Otter keeps his oath to Lucas, Francesco to his church. King Olfon makes an oath again to Juana. Everyone in this novel except Otter is simping for this girl, in case that was not obvious. Even the villains are simping for her, and several of the female villains. It's that kind of book, although they're not simping romantically. But Olfon is simping for Juana. He desperately wants to marry her, but he makes an oath that he will do anything he can to help her, and as a consequence, he takes actions directly contrary numerous times to his own sexual desire, to help her and Lucas, her lover, escape, and then at the end of the novel stands firm with several of his men fighting the priesthood. And we have no idea if he loses his life. The novel is sadly ambiguous on this score, although we can all hope that for his noble and valiant actions he did not die, and successfully returned to rule his people. And yeah, that's the novel. I highly recommend you read it. I've covered only a couple of the major instances, and it's a fascinating novel with amazing dialogue and a really interesting portrayal of slavery in Africa. Not African, like not the as slavery as it was practiced in Africa and how the slavers treated their slaves. So I highly recommend you check it out. And as Lucas himself said, and as I will henceforth leave you, for heart, home, and honor.